Leaders often imagine their decisions as singular events, a moment of clarity, a judgment call, a choice made in real time. But the truth is that decisions rarely emerge from a single moment. They emerge from architectures leaders build long before the choice arises. Patterns of listening, structures of input, ways of framing a problem, agreements about how truth will be spoken and how uncertainty will be handled. These architectures determine whether wisdom is accessible or whether it appears only by accident. Without architecture, decisions drift towards urgency. They're shaped by whoever speaks first or loudest. They're guided by incomplete information or unexamined assumptions. They become reactions rather than discernment. Leaders may still land on the right choice, but it is more luck than clarity, and luck is not a system anyone can rely on. Decision architecture begins with the kind of questions a leader is willing to ask. Some questions narrow the view. What is the fastest solution? What will cause the least resistance? What will allow us to move forward without disruption? Other questions widen it. What is actually at stake here? Who will be affected in ways we have not considered? What assumptions are shaping our sense of the problem? Leaders who are willing to ask expansive questions create conditions where insight has the room to surface rather than be crowded out by expedience. The next layer involves who is allowed to speak into the process. Not every voice holds the same perspective, but every voice reveals something about the terrain. Some team members articulate the risks a leader cannot see. Others sense cultural shifts before they show up in metrics or outcomes. Still, others bring a kind of grounded intuition that comes from proximity to the work. Decision architecture is not about gathering endless input. It is about curating a circle that captures enough of the environment to prevent blind spots from becoming fault lines. How the leader frames the decision is another structural element. A poorly framed question produces distorted answer. A narrow frame forces the team into false choices. An inflated frame exaggerates the stakes. A well-shaped frame holds the complexity without dramatizing it. It gives the team enough definition to work with, but enough openness to allow fresh insight to form. Leaders who pay attention to framing often discover that the decision shifts not because the facts change, but because the architecture gives clarity, new conditions to grow. Healthy decision architectures, the questions, structures, and patterns leaders create to help them gather, categorize, prioritize inputs and information, also make room for dissent. Not token disagreement, not performative skepticism, genuine dissent that tests the strength of an idea. When dissent is unwelcome, decisions become fragile because they've never been pushed against. When dissent is encouraged, the leader becomes less concerned with being right and more attuned to what the decision will require once it is in motion. Wisdom grows in that tension between conviction and scrutiny. Then there is the rhythm of decision. Some choices should be made slowly because speed would distort the view. Others must be made quickly because delay would create unnecessary drift. Architecture involves discerning that pace. It means recognizing when the team needs time to metabolize the implications and when they need clarity in order to move. Leaders who ignore pace end up with decisions that are either rushed and shallow or endlessly delayed and deprived of momentum. Decision architecture begins with structures and questions. It makes room for dissent, that is more than token disagreement, and crucially includes reflection after the choice has been made. Not to justify the outcome, but to understand the process. What helped us see clearly? Where did we overlook something important? What dynamics influenced the direction? How did the architecture hold? How did it fail? Leaders who practice reflective review create a feedback loop that strengthens every future decision. Wisdom becomes cumulative rather than episodic. What emerges from all of this is a different way of understanding leadership. Decisions are not moments of brilliance. They are the visible expression of a structure the leader has built beneath the surface. A structure that distributes attention, tests assumptions, and creates conditions where truth can surface without fear. When this structure is in place, wisdom becomes less about intuition and more about design. A leader who tends to their decision architecture is not trying to engineer certainty. No. What they're doing is they're building an environment where clarity has a real chance of appearing. They're acknowledging that wisdom is rarely spontaneous. It grows when the right questions are asked, when the right voices are present, and when the process itself is sturdy enough to carry the weight of what's at stake. In the end, decision architecture is one of the unseen infrastructures that allows leadership to endure. It steadies the leader, it steadies the team, and over time it becomes a quiet assurance that wisdom does not depend on perfect insight, but on the structures that make insight possible.